your boy Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates. All I ask is that you think.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates, and welcome to the Just My 3 Cents podcast, a live, interactive, rapid fire podcast where you can jump on and give us your 3 cents on tough conversations on race, sex, and culture. Glad to be back with you. We skipped out on last week. We just try to drop Wednesdays, Thursday nights, one of those 2 nights. Try to go live so y'all can jump on with us. Of course, you can share and let people hear the replay. But the goal is to have you give us your 3 cents on whatever discussion that we may be having. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into tonight's discussion, which was labeled 50-50 marriages, a different perspective. So this is a hot button item that unfortunately draws a lot of ire, a lot of conversation on social media. And I just wanted to, in a sense, give you my 3 cents and my perspective and how my perspective on 50-50 marriages have changed over the years and things that I've, learned recently, wanted to share. And even a couple things I found this week as I was preparing for tonight's show. And again, just so you know, there's a link on Facebook. There's a link on YouTube right below the broadcast that if you want to give us your 3 cents at any point in this conversation, you can please join the conversation because we try to make these 30 minutes and get in and out this thing. So you got 30 minutes to jump in here with me. So with that said, I wanted to give just a little context for those that know I'm a numbers guy, love stats. And so I want to just give some numbers to get in perspective because here's the reality specifically in the U.S. The reality in the U.S. is based on, in a sense, marriages that we see today is almost, if you just go by the numbers, if you will, the conversation of whether a couple should go 50-50 or a man should pay all the bill. And, now we even have situations where women could be the breadwinner in the situation. So there's a lot of dynamics that can happen within a marriage. And again, these are hot button items, but the reality is based on the number of, if you want to refer to whether man is the breadwinner or even, you can think about traditional, maybe a woman in a sense being a housewife, if you will, and the man works and she's the housewife. And so we have these long drawn out discussions that literally drives us crazy on social media. And, even prior to social media, this is something I've been hearing all my life, if you will. But the reality is in America, traditional marriage is really a thing of the past. And I'm not saying this to say which way anyone should go. I just want to, in a sense, give some context of where the numbers are and then give some perspective of what, in a sense, a 50-50 marriage can and might look like today based on my experiences with my friends, things that I researched. Again, just bring it to the table because our goal is to raise the culture and, in a sense, put things in perspective. So when I say traditional marriages where the man is the sole breadwinner, if you will, in America, only 2-3% of marriages are literally set up under that structure. Again, that number being that low doesn't mean it shouldn't be the case, but it's just crazy to me to think that we have all this dialogue about traditional marriages when the reality is in America today, a lot of women work full time, work part time, bring money, work from home, and in a sense do bring some funds into the home that quite often is used, sometimes collectively, for the actual used collectively for their marriage, if you will. So we have a lot of conversations again about traditional. I got a brother that's trying to jump on. Brother, it says your device is not connected. So I don't know if you can connect another way, but I definitely want to, again, allow people to jump in on this conversation with me. But just so you know, I got a message that says your device is not connected. So maybe you can jump off and jump back on, and I'll get you back on the broadcast so that I, have you be a part of this conversation. In the meantime, let me give a little context and give some numbers. I already said, for the most part in America, traditional marriages, if we consider traditional being the man paying all the bills, the woman being a housewife, that is pretty much a thing of the past. But getting into tonight's conversation, just to give some numbers or whatever. So just to basically marriages, we always talk about this in America right now. I always talk about the divorce rate. The divorce rate, for example, is still holding at 50%. It's been holding at 50% really for the last decade, 2 decades, if you will. There was an assumption that it would have been even lower by now or whatever. So basically half marriages make it or whatever. And so when we get into this dialogue of 50-50, who should pay the bills and all this type of thing, there's people that make these arguments for one is better than the other, right? And when you look at the numbers, pretty much half the marriages end in no matter what we do. But here's something that I was surprised to find, again, just being a numbers guy, in looking up this dialogue. For the few traditional marriages that we have, they actually have, and again, I'm not making an argument, I'm just giving numbers right now. They actually have a 14% higher divorce rate, right, than quote unquote 50-50 marriages in America specifically. Now, outside of America, this is very different, right? So again, I'm just talking about the US numbers. So I was actually surprised to find that. And here's why I was surprised. Now I want to give a little bit of my journey in understanding 50-50 marriage. So I was surprised because I would say in my own life, not necessarily growing up in the South, if you will, I definitely remember growing up where my grandfather, quote unquote, was the man of the house and my grandmother was the woman of the house, right? And so I saw, in a sense, some level of that structure. However, it wasn't completely traditional because my grandmother went to work every day, for 8 hours. Now, as a grandson, I lived with them till I was 8 years old. And so as a grandson, I didn't have any concept of how the money was divvied up at the time. But again, I definitely saw in a sense, the traditional roles, if you will, played by my grandfather and my grandmother, right? I saw those traditional roles. However, my grandmother worked. And the reality, now that I really look back on it, I didn't see, growing up in the South, having a neighborhood in which we attended, in a sense, the neighborhood church, if you will. So we all knew each other, if you will. And so when I look back on it, not only did my grandmother work, but most women my grandmother's age work. There was a few women who, in a sense, did not have to work and was only a housewife, if you will. But they were actually rare. And so while I saw the traditional roles, I'm ultimately saying that even in my own relative experience, it kind of fit into the American paradigm of, in a sense, that women, in a sense, still went out and worked and made their own money, if you will, right? And so even in my Southern traditional raising, I didn't see a lot of women who were just housewives, if you will. So again, fitting into the American paradigm. And so when I think about my own life, being damn near 50, in my entire life, I've heard a lot of these dialogues of, back and forth about how things should be in a country where that hasn't been our experience, or when I've seen these dialogues had in academia. One of the things that has been pointed out specifically for the African American community is that, to a degree, since existence, to a degree, African American women, in general, have, in a sense, had to work in some form of fashion, even prior to, in sense, being freed from enslavement, if you think about our ancestors, and after that point. And so I've seen people make the statement that even this concept of having a man, in a sense, play his role and pay for everything, that's, for the most part, from what I've been told, and the research that I've found, I guess you would say, that's never been our reality. So again, the dialogue tonight is, so we have this vitriol discussion about 50-50, when our reality is Black women, generally speaking, have worked, if you will say, to a degree, alongside our men, or had to work in some capacity. And then, as we know, historically, as the women's movement improved, women could get into other jobs. So maybe 100 years ago, our Black women, in a sense, were working as well, if you will, but maybe they were limited to certain jobs. So obviously in 2021, those limitations don't apply. So just wanted to say there hasn't, and what I guess what I'm saying is to a degree, it's crazy how upset we get about this conversation when I don't know a lot of Black people who even have the reality to make an argument for traditional marriage. Now, here's the context for my life. Again, for anybody watching, you can hit the link and jump on. One brother tried and we couldn't get him connected. So you can jump in on this conversation. So in my own life, I remember about 5 to 7 years ago getting attached to this marriage group that was, in a sense, breaking down. Oh, I got some comments. Let me look at the comments as well. Okay, yeah. What's up, bro? Peace, Teddy. If I hope I'm saying that right. But I remember getting attached to this marriage group, and they were really making the case for how it is much better to have, I would use the term traditional marriage, where the man pays everything and the woman falls naturally into her feminine role and the man falls naturally into the masculine role. And so in learning about it, I literally realized, wow, this makes a lot of sense, because here's the context of the American paradigm. Just to simplify it, the American paradigm, where in a sense we even say today, with the way the economy is and with the way the economy is, that we always say it takes two. I grew growing up most of my life, I was always saying it takes two incomes to make it in America today. And, to a degree, it's coming up where I came from, and just, while I was with my grandparents up until I was 8, eventually my mother moved out, and it was just me and her. Again, my mother, was a single mother, if you will. And so I grew up, in a sense, watching her try to make ends meet and struggle for us to make it in our small town, if you will. And so, seeing that, most of my life, my mindset that I would always kind of prescribe to was it takes two income. Now, I later found out in my grandparents' situation that for the most part, while my grandmother, again, they played their traditional roles inside the home completely, but while my grandmother did work, I now understand that for the most part, my grandfather was, the bigger breadwinner, which I did figure that out as a kid. But I now understand, for the most part, my grandmother's money didn't really come to the household. It was for her to do her things. She liked to shop and things of that nature. So it gave her extra money to do the things she liked. So to a degree, my grandfather was, in a sense, still very traditional in the sense that he was never dependent, from what I understand, on my grandmother's money by the time I came along. I can't speak to what before I came along. But by the time I came along, it was definitely an evident difference in who made the most money. I figured that out on my own, but, did not know until I was older that she really, from what I understand, didn't have to contribute. So my grandfather, in a sense, made sure the family was secure financially, and pretty much handled all of that business, if you will. So wanted to highlight that out to say that in my own growing up, in my own life, I just always assumed that, hey, I would meet a sister and we would, in a sense, just put our funds together, because that's just what I always saw. I never seen necessarily a traditional role. And then I got exposed to this marriage group that highlighted the benefits of having a traditional situation and how it could benefit the children even more. And I was really open to this, a number of years ago. And here was the revelation for me. And then I want to read this post that really will set this conversation off real quick. So the revelation for me, when I was getting exposed to this group, it was almost like I felt like I was getting exposed to a better way to, in a sense, have a family. Because that's one thing that has gotten lost in today's conversation when we start talking about marriage. In a sense, we were high on love and low on legacy. But historically, humans have got married legacy and love, legacy, then love. And that's something that I always make an argument now to raise the culture. We really should put legacy in the proper place. So with that said, when I got exposed to men being in their masculine role, paying all the bills, got exposed to this concept only about 6 or 7 years ago. Because again, I had never thought about it. I thought I would match up with a lady, put our funds together, and we'll figure it out. 50-50 is kind of what I had in my mind. And then I get exposed to this, and I was like, wow, this seems like to be a stronger concept. But it made me realize that because I had never thought about necessarily following in those footsteps. Now, naturally, as a man, we all, in a sense, want to make enough funds to where we're taking care of everything. That's kind of, I think, very natural to us. So I agree with that as well. So the idea was to get rich and wealthy and be able to do it, but it wasn't something that I saw as necessary growing up in this era, in this American paradigm. So anyway, I saw this to say that, so when I got exposed to this and saw it as possibly a better way to have a family and the children could benefit more if this was done correctly, when I saw that, I said, well, this is better. And so the paradigm for me was, wow, I have lived my single life in a manner that was not prepared for this, that was not preparing for this better way to have a family. Because ultimately, can't we all agree that to a degree, there's no better way to have a family than to plan one, in a sense. Find a wife, or vice versa, find a husband, and you plan to have your children. In other words, you prepare for them before they get here. So always wanted to, in a sense, do that, but never thought of, until I got exposed to this traditional marriage thing, I never thought about it. And so it made me realize, if I think this is better, then I must step up my game. It's not as simple as, all right, what do you make? What do I make? Let's join together. If I now see this traditional thing as a better way, but never had been exposed to traditional from the standpoint of one breadwinner, if you will. I'd only seen what I told you about. Now, I want to put 50-50 on his head, because there's another reason why I consider this better, because I realize here's a mistake I possibly would have made had I gotten married before I got exposed to some of this traditional way of thinking. And I'm not telling nobody on here which way you should go. I'm just having a dialogue to raise the culture and put out seeds, because these are how these things made me think. And I made me, and if y'all know about the Mental Dialogue Talk Show, all I ask is that you think, or what I read, right? But here's something that I got exposed to, because I probably would have done this prior to getting a better understanding of how to, in a sense, have a legacy. Marriage ain't just about who you fall in love with, which I've done a show on losing 10 years of just being caught up with the love aspect and not having enough focus on the legacy aspect. So here's a perspective that one of my friends put out. And I think this is a real life consideration for ladies today when it comes to 50-50. So this is what I saw a friend of mine put up on social media. And it says, his sister says her opinion on going half on the bills. She says, half ain't the problem. Half and a housewife is the problem. If I work 40 plus hours a week, just like you, but you expect dinner on the table, the house to be clean, laundry done, and the kids to be settled, that's where the problem is. If we're going to be equally yoked, it's going to be that way across the board. But don't bring me $600 for your half of rent when you ain't half did shit all week but work, because I did that as well. And if cooking, cleaning, and maintaining functionally was so easy, why you ain't help do it? So before I get exposed to this marriage group who recommends men pay for the bills, fall into your masculinity, women, in a sense, take care of the home, fall into your femininity. Again, I'm not encouraging which way to go, but I realize I never considered what I just seen today. And this is the pushback that a lot of sisters make. And it makes sense if you've never thought about, quote unquote, what 50-50 even looks like. You just have this concept that she has to work too. But if there's also a concept that, in a sense, you are the lead and she's, quote unquote, the follower. And again, I'm not talking about a hierarchy of who leading. Like the sister Chasing Yancey, she was on our radio show just a couple of weeks ago, and she says, hey, in order for to avoid chaos and have organization, somebody has to lead. So she, in a sense, she doesn't mind, in a sense, there being a leader, but she said on the show, doesn't mean somebody's above you, if you will. So of course, there's obviously some men who look at that as being above the woman and that type of thing. But even when it's not looked at as a being above, the issue, if you've never thought about, if in a sense you want to play your masculine role, if your half meant what you just heard from this young lady, we got to admit, sisters got a point with that, right? We got to admit that if we're thinking, okay, I'm going to play my role, but it includes, I come home to dinner or whatever, and I ain't doing nothing around the house, just from a one-on-one basis, we can admit that's not fair. But here's the other issue again. Let's bring legacy into this. When you bring legacy into it, that's when you're ultimately talking about children, right? So when you start talking about children and legacy, the reality is, in more cases than not, the nurturing of the children is going to fall on that woman. So at that point, in a sense, if you even have the concept of she has to work too, if you have that concept, the bulk of that's going to fall to the woman. And I had this sister say to me as we was talking about this very post this week, she says that ultimately for a lot of sisters, this is how they feel about this situation. So they understand that naturally as the woman, that's going to fall to them, but they feel like to a degree, if in a sense, a man isn't divvying up the additional housework to the degree that they're being helpful, that they start looking at the man as, in a sense, another person they have to take care of, almost as if it's another child that we have to take care of. And again, I was just open to the perspective after hearing sisters point out that's how having a significant other in the house, whether married or not, felt in those situations where a lot of the child's duties were falling to them. So now resorting back to the traditional group, they pointed out that because it takes so much time, if you will, to properly nurture children, that the reason they're recommending that in a sense woman is in a sense stays at home and maybe make money from home versus having to go out is one for the nurturing of the children, but there also should be enough time for her to, in a sense, have enough self-care for herself in a sense to play the role for the children and for her husband, and if you will, properly sex the husband. Because what I hear now is because of my own experience in life, and I don't think we as men have to think about this. We, in a sense, may ask for a role without realizing, in a sense, what type of burden it is on a woman. In a sense, if you're not going to step up and be one, if you will, more of the breadwinner or the complete breadwinner, not only becomes unfair, and then we're upset when she, in a sense, can't give us enough sex or is refusing to give us enough sex because she's worn out, by the children, worn out by the children. And what that traditional group was talking about was that the husband role is to set it up so that she's not worn out. That's the level of in a sense, manhood that you should seek in a traditional role. And it's almost, we get into those the high value conversations or whatever, right? That's a big thing right now. So outside of getting to that level, then to have the expectation that, in a sense, a woman should fall in her role becomes completely unfair, and it's not realistic if you're not going to step up. So we spend time in this 50-50 traditional conversation, really looking at spending so much time focused on what the other gender should be doing versus what are you going to do to get that, in a sense, of what you're looking for. And the key thing that came out of the conversation I had with the sister this week was, to a degree, if that's what you're aiming for and you are looking within to become, in a sense, the type of man or the type of woman that you need to be for what you're looking for, then you also, man and woman, need to choose someone who's on the same page. Because here's another aspect of focused on the concept of 50-50. This is an article I found this week, and I wanted to share a couple of thoughts from it, and I'm going to close this thing out. And so one aspect of 50-50 that a lot of people lose sight of is a 50-50 relationship implies that you are keeping the score every deed you do. And I literally read people talking about focused on 50-50. They literally were watching their partner, trying to keep up with who's doing what in the house. And so you literally are losing from the beginning if you're sitting tallying who's doing what at the house. Can you see how, in a sense, that is a disaster from the start? And something that got Brother Vaughn, the Love Alchemist, said on my show, and he talked about this, and this was very key. He said this: there are some things that my better half just can't do better than me. And so they basically, he and his wife, who've been married for 30 years, their roles fall into what are you better at and what are you better at, versus just lining up to a man does this and a woman does this. And he gave the example that there's things that, in a sense, he just gave one example. And just circles about like packing a trunk. He was like, that's something that his wife is excellent at. So for every trip, in a sense, she shows him how to pack the trunk versus him letting his male ego get in the way. He just used that as a small example, but can you imagine versus just saying, hey, here's my role versus playing to what's better for both of you. So again, these are just a couple of suggestions that I, just wanted to make when it comes to the 50-50 and just giving my own insight in the sense that if I value my masculinity to the extent that I want to be a traditional man, then it's about me stepping up. Not only stepping up to be the type of man, in a sense, if I will, who pays all the bills, but the other part of it, especially in a U.S. paradigm where there's, in a sense, not a lot of traditional marriages, the reality is, if that's what I choose to shoot for, then I also am obligated to choose a woman who lines up. And there are plenty of women who that is their goal. And so I'm also, the accountability is that I choose a woman who goes for that. What happens in this quote unquote gender war is whatever your belief is, whether it's 50-50 or traditional, people are saying, trying to place something on other people and upset with them for not lining up. So for example, if I'm traditional and versus me telling other women they should fall in line, it is part of my duty is finding someone who already agrees with that. That's where the compatibility needs to start if you're going to, in fact, build a legacy. We're up here trying to put people in what we believe. So that's how that dialogue can improve if you make sense. I hope I added something to the culture. I was hoping, some people might jump on. One brother tried to jump on with me. And so I'm going to close out with a piece from my upcoming book, Just My 3 Cents. This is the Just My 3 Cents podcast. I'm sorry I missed last week, so hopefully y'all can jump on with me next week. With that said, I'm going to read a piece from my book. This is how I end every show. And I'm going to get off this thing. And hopefully y'all can join us Saturday for the Mental Dialogue Talk Show where we're discussing Odell Beckham and Bitcoin. What the fuck happened? So for those of you that know about that, I got some financial people coming on to discuss what happened with the Odell Beckham situation. With that said, I'm going to end with this piece from my book and I'm out this thing. Today's commentary from the upcoming Just My 3 Cents Necessary Conversations on Race, Sex, and Culture. Just lost my place. That's so funny. Here we go. Black Socrates speaks to black men. To all black people, first and foremost, we will all do ourselves a favor to stop arguing over who has it worse in America between the black man and black woman, especially since America still has its foot on both of our necks. However, black men in general, we must become acutely aware of how we've adopted behaviors that do not value the black woman for the goddess she is. If we are very honest, the majority of black women have stood with us historically and currently, at least until the recent gender wars have brought this into question. Yes, more of our queens seem to be falling for this divisive rhetoric, but black men, it is our failure to honor and protect our women in the first place that gave way to this environment. I'm not pointing the finger, but I am speaking to the reality, to the responsibility we as black kings must take to turn this around. I am guilty, as most of us are, but kings feeling unsupported by our queens is a weak position to take. And when we choose this position, the question becomes, how can we find values in our queen? Excuse me 1 second, y'all. Unfortunately, any man settling in this position will probably never see the true value of the black woman and therefore fail to ever enter a healthy marriage with one, if at all. Although the increasing number of men taking this position results from the lack of natural families in the black community over the past 60 years. As a community, we must remember for all of our efforts to improve as a community, we must remember for all of our efforts to improve our collective economics, education, mental and physical health, etc., it is all for naught until we fix the basic relationship between the black man and woman. The cornerstone of strong communities are strong families, period. The first step is for kings to respect and protect all queens as if they were our own sisters and mothers. They are worthy of respect and adulation, regardless of how they may carry themselves, simply because they are the givers of life. Although I must say to the queens, there is a great deal of power in how, I'm sorry, y'all. I'm trying to do two things at once. Bear with me. Although I must say to the queens, there's a great deal of power in how you carry yourselves that will make us kings fall in line and protect you. I understand the rhetoric out there that says respect women no matter how they act, but like it or not, the rhetoric refuses to recognize how men and women in general are wired differently. This has nothing to do with social constructs. Like I always tell my closest sisters when they seek my advice on men, I ask, do you want to discuss how men should be, or do you want the reality of how men truly are? My name is Black Socrates, and I've spoken the truth as I know it. All I ask is that you think. See y'all next Wednesday or Thursday night. Holla at y'all. I'm out. Just my 3 cents where we make it make sense.